Okay, let us get started then. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for taking time today for the last fireside chat of the year. How we're in December is beyond me. Um, Welcome, everybody. I appreciate you taking the time. Today, we have the pleasure of hearing from Miren Oca, founder and CEO of Ocaquatics, and she is joined by Chris Michael of EOT Advisors. And I will let Chris. Well, Chris, why don't you introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll wait for Miren to introduce herself, because we're going to hear her story anyway.
Sure thing, Steve. Thanks so much for having me on. EOT Advisors brought employee ownership trust to the United States about 10 years ago. We're the leading provider of services to business owners, helping them sell to an employee ownership trust. And we welcome inquiries from people after today's webinar. I'm happy to be here again.
Thanks, Chris. And I know that I continue to have a problem with a box here, but let's try that one more time. And I'm Steve Storkin, Executive Director of the Employee Ownership Expansion Network, and also representing the Florida Center for Employee Ownership, which you'll hear a little bit more about later on. Employee Ownership Expansion Network is here for one reason. We are trying to address the silver tsunami, trying to get access and in front of as many of the 2.9 million business owners across the country who are over the age of 50 and who will be transferring ownership of their company, which affects about 32 million employees by estimation by Project Equity in a study that they did. Almost 6.5 trillion in revenue is produced by those companies. And so our sole mission is to do these kinds of outreach and education across the country so that people know about the forms of employee ownership and how it can benefit their company in their transition period. 6 out of 10 of these business owners, according to different studies, that's about the average, plan to sell in the next decade. And up to, I've heard even 2 out of 3 won't find a buyer, but we'll use the 1 out of 3. A third of the sellers won't even find a buyer. They'll end up selling their client list, their assets. Some of them will just close the doors and move on. And so we are here today to hear a story about one of these business owners that contacted one of the state centers. You'll hear from Miren and how she got to this point. But she had contacted the Florida Center for Employee Ownership after doing her own research. The Florida Center for Employee Ownership is one of 24 state centers for employee ownership. We call them boots on the ground to expand employee ownership across the country. And so all of these 24 state centers, some of which are on this call today, provide education, resources, technical support, and connections to referral sources like Chris, to make connections and to teach people about the different forms of employee ownership. I think Roy is also on the call. Roy is the executive director of the Florida Center, and you can see here if you have your camera, if you happen to be in Florida or close to Florida and you want to connect to Roy and learn more about employee ownership and how you can improve it in Florida, you can see his contact information there. And I will bring these back up again at the end. If you want to know more about the list of state centers and where you might find a state center to help you with employee ownership in your state, you can click also on that QR code to get the map. Otherwise, eoxnetwork.org is the place to go in order to get access to all forms of employee ownership. The 3 forms of employee ownership that we work to promote are ESOPs, worker cooperatives, and EOTs. We will spend all day today talking about employee ownership trusts. To compare that to an ESOP is a retirement plan that owns all or part of the company on behalf of its employees. It is the most common form of broad-based employee ownership. It is a retirement plan. That is the main difference between other differences as well. But the main thing to know about an ESOP is that it is a retirement plan that purchases the business, and the account balances of employees are inside of their retirement plan. A worker cooperative is directly owned by the employee owners. They usually have a small buy-in to buy a share of the company, and then they share in the profits and have the ability to elect the board of directors, serve on committees, much more of democracy at work than the other forms of employee ownership. And then the EOT, as Chris said, is new to the United States, started in the UK. It is a trust that holds or buys some or all of the shares of the company on behalf of its employees. Those employees typically share in the profits in some form. We'll hear from Miren today about how she does that. It's a much more flexible form of employee ownership. than an ESOP or typically a worker cooperative or comparable to a worker cooperative. Many of you know this already, but why employee ownership? Employee ownership has many different benefits um, to the communities, to the employees, and to the companies themselves. More prosperous employees, stronger companies, increase local spending. It also helps business owners like Miren preserve their legacy. They keep it alive, keep jobs in the community. They receive fair market value. They have higher retention rates, and really just keep this strong family business continuing on in the future. With that, I will ask Miren to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about the history and the creation of Aquatics. I say that wrong every single time, so I will let you say it.
Okay. So my last name is Oca. So the business is Ocaquatics. And we have been in business in last February, it was 30 years. And we are, I started my business in college out of necessity. I was a student at Tulane University in New Orleans. I was studying biochemistry, and I wanted to go to medical school and become an orthopedic surgeon. And I got pregnant at the age of 19. So I took a break from school. I moved to Miami where my mother was living at the time, and I needed to make a living. So, I eventually did go back to school. I got my degree in biology, and I thought I would go to med school later, but I needed to make some money. So I did incorporate in my business in February of 1994, and I was 22 years old. My son was almost 2, and I did swimming lessons. It's what I knew how to do. So I went to backyard homes. I taught swimming lessons. I went to hotel pools. I went, I just went anywhere. Anyone who would teach me who would have me teach their children to swim, I traveled there. And I started to grow my little business. And eventually I actually got one of these hotel pools and secured that pool. And then I got some country clubs, and I started to grow the business and started to hire people. And I knew very little about business. My parents were immigrants who had a restaurant or had 2 restaurants. And while the food was really, really amazing, and it was a really great, it was a great restaurant, it was not a great business. I saw them struggle with taxes. I saw them struggle with team members. I saw them struggle with all sorts of things about business. So I knew that I didn't want to open a business. And here I was stuck with a business. So I really thought I was just going to jump in and learn as much as I possibly could. So I spent a lot of time in bookstores, a lot of time in libraries, and I read about business. And that was 30 years ago, and now we have grown. We have about 165 team members in high season. We teach about 6,500 swimming lessons a week, and we're nearing our 3 millionth swimming lesson taught milestone. And I never went to med school. So that is, and now I think Steve is sharing a video of Ocaquatics and the work that we do. And yes, I think it's the best job ever. I never ever thought I would be doing something like this.
You said 165 employees and how many swimming lessons a week?
About 6,500
At 5 locations.
at over the 5 locations. Yes, we have.
Wow.
We started in hotels, country clubs, private schools, and then eventually 15 years ago, I decided to build a location. I got a warehouse. I got a landlord I convinced him to let me put a pool in his building. And I did that, built a second one, same way. And then I actually bought 3 more properties and built out 3 more swim schools. So now we have 5 year-round, indoor, warm water, beautiful locations.
And what if you had to look at the demographics of your employees? What's a typical employee that you have? Age range? I'm sure it runs the gamut, but you have your workforce is fairly young, correct?
It is, but we probably hire the majority of our team members are 16 to 25. But we do have 16 to 81 on our team. And in fact, our co-owners, we call everybody co-owners, range from 18, 19 to 81 now. So we're in Miami, so we're it's pretty diverse, especially where people were born. And so we have team members that were born in 17 different countries represented on our staff. We have a lot of people who started out with us, 15, 16, 17 years ago, and started out as custodians and then made their way up through management. So we have really, we've really grown our team, grown the team members personally and professionally as we've grown the swim school.
And I know, when you and I have talked and I saw you speak before, you talked about always having a purpose, even though you didn't know what to do with the business, how to start a business, did lots of reading. You started as a small business owner, you continued to have that small business feel and have a purpose and treat people, the way you would want to be treated. Can you talk a little bit more about the phrase always having a purpose?
So we have a twofold mission statement. So we make families safer around the water. We love doing the work that we do, but we also, the second part of our mission is to help our team members grow under this umbrella of social and environmental responsibility so that we can grow the business in a sustainable way and make a bigger impact in the world. So we're a certified B Corporation. We are a public benefit corporation. We're 1% for the Planet partners. We are active conscious capitalism members. We're really into doing well. We want to be a business that takes care of the community. It takes care of our swimmers. It takes care of our families. It takes care of the community. It takes care of the planet. So that these sorts of things are really important to us, and we feel that it's really important to our team members as well. So they're pretty happy, and they end up staying with us longer.
And just from the things that you shared and the pictures on the screen, hopefully everybody can see you do a lot of community events. I know you mentioned community, but you're out in the community quite a bit and offering employees the ability to be in the community, correct?
Yes, we do. In fact, we just did one on Friday after Thanksgiving. We've done it for now about 15 years. We cleaned up trash at a park, and actually the same park that's in that picture. And this year, with 47 volunteers, we cleaned up 419 pounds of trash, which is pretty astonishing. And it's just pretty great. It's sad that we find that much, but it really is fulfilling and satisfying for our team to go out there and to help the community that they live and work in. So this is our team member mantra. We are different. We make a difference. And we really do feel that the work that we do makes a difference because we make families safer around the water, but also in the social and environmental responsibility aspects of what we're teaching our team members. So, and again, I think our team really want to work for a business that's making a difference. And that helps our customer satisfaction and that helps our bottom line. So we actually do very well as a business.
I can't believe 419 pounds in one park.
I know it's pretty sad, but it was on the water and there's a lot right on the water. So definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, first of all, congratulations. I saw somebody put in the chat that said you're an inspiration to us all. I don't know if you know Tiernan, but yes, I would agree with him. Running a company is hard enough, and then having it make a difference and a purpose. Kudos to you for sure.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about get into the employee ownership side, the sales side. Can you talk a little bit about your succession plan? When did you start to think about it? How long has this been on your mind? And then, a little bit about the beginnings of that transition and that succession. What did you do to prepare, kind of the research that you did? And then we'll get into the what you call the alphabet soup. But let's start with the process beforehand and when you started thinking about all of this.
So, I was just mentioning that we do really well. We have this great team. We have a great culture, and that really does translate to a pretty healthy bottom line. And I think, we've had some good success, and we got onto PE's radar, to private equity's radar somehow. We were first approached in 2015 by a private equity group. I didn't even know what the initials PE meant when they first approached us. But I did talk to them and I thought, well, this is interesting. But I didn't really want to sell to private equity. So about the 25-year mark for me in business, so about 6 years ago, I really started to think about, I need a succession plan because, what happens if, so I went back, my first thought was to go back to the little boy who changed it all, who changed the trajectory of my life, and that is my son. And I went to talk to Ian, and he had worked in the business for 14 years. And he was perfect to take on the business. He had chlorine in his blood. He was very good at the business. He really loved the impact work that we were doing. And it was a logical transition, but he didn't want it. He wasn't feeling it. And, he told me that on a regular basis, that he wanted to go off and do his own thing. And so at some point we reached a point where he stepped away, and it was hard, but it actually worked out really well because it helped me think about getting the business into the hands of the people who are really passionate about it. And those were my employees. So I really did at that point start looking into that alphabet soup of employee of all the different types of succession planning. So I had no idea what I was going to do. And then eventually, Ian was in that alphabet soup. And then I did move to DIY. I was going to really try and do it myself and do phantom stock or stock options or sell to some team members. Or I had a couple of different options. I actually took a course at Stanford one semester to learn about all the different options and opportunities out there. But I still wasn't convinced because I had custodians on our team who had worked here for 15 years, and I knew they would have a hard time buying in, and I really wanted this to be broad-based. So then I looked at co-ops and then PE. I did talk to PE quite a bit more, but I looked at co-ops, and co-ops were really interesting because it could affect everyone, and I really thought it was a good idea. There were some reasons why the democratic method of voting on decisions was not going to be right for what we wanted to do. And I was also concerned about my team members still having to buy in. So then I found ESOPs. And ESOPs, employee stock ownership plans, I love the idea. I spent a ton of time researching it. I spoke with every CEO of every ESOP I could find. And for a while, I was convinced this was the right decision. I joined NCEO. I think I've read every single book out there, every podcast, every blog that exists on ESOPs. But I was a little bit on the small side. So half the attorneys that I spoke to said that I was on the edge of being too small. And then I had some professionals that told me I was okay. So I kind of listened to who I wanted to listen to. I finally engaged with an attorney. I did a valuation. I did a feasibility study, and we were on our way. We were going the ESOP route. And I was pretty content. I did know there was a lot of oversight with Department of Labor and ERISA, and which is good because it is a retirement plan and it needs that. But the process was very, very expensive. And there were also some significant administrative fees every year. I also had concerns about the delayed gratification of an ESOP, where our team would get equity, but they would have to hold it for a long time because they were really young. And so they had a hard time understanding that concept. And then I really was concerned when I spoke to one particular CEO of an ESOP company, and he told me that his company was being sold to private equity. And that's when I realized that the trustee serves as a fiduciary for the ESOP and has to sell to the highest bidder if that offer does come along. And so that's when I decided, wow, I do need to keep exploring and researching. And I met someone in the Pacific Northwest who was doing an EOT and was thinking about that. I talked to you and I talked to Roy also, and that's when I learned more about EOTs. And that's when I got introduced to Chris. I actually heard Chris Michael on a podcast as well. And that's when I just started going down this EOT route. And really, it was it just felt better. It felt like it was the better fit for us. So I went down that path. I learned a lot, and I really liked the EOT model, and I can get into some of the aspects of to why I wanted that EOT if you'd like me to go that way.
Yeah, I think I would just pause for a second. One of the
Sure.
things that caught my ear was that you were on the small side of an ESOP.
Mhm.
Not all of your employees would meet the requirements to join the ESOP or become a participant in the ESOP, even if you had some really short waiting periods. Same thing on the EOT. Of the 165 employees, when you started doing that research, how many did you think as you went into this were really going to be those core owners, whether it be an ESOP or whether it be an EOT? What were you looking at from that standpoint? So others who might be in that thing saying, well, If she's small, how small am I? I mean, that
Yeah.
might be one of the questions that's out there.
Yeah. Well, right now I have 52. So 52 have qualified to be co-owners. We don't call our team members employees. So employee owner just didn't fit. So we call
Sure.
everybody co-owners. We have 52. And on our team, once you hit 2,500 hours, you qualify to be a co-owner.
Okay.
So that is and that's one of the reasons why I like the EOT is the flexibility. The trust is extremely flexible. I was able to put into the trust when, how people would become owners. I was able to put stipulations into the trust about how we would strive to maintain our B Corp certification. There were just different things that I really wanted. I wanted us to remain this values aligned and mission driven company. And those things were really, really important to me. And so that's why the EOT worked out so well because of the flexibility of the trust.
And that 2,400, that 2,500 hours
Mhm.
is a cumulative hours, if I remember right. Once you've
Yes,
worked that many hours, so someone who had been there, even part-time, who had worked for you for 10,
absolutely.
15 years, had put in that many cumulative hours. It's not an ongoing, I need to put this many in every year to continue. It's to become a
Right,
co-owner. I just need to have worked here long enough to accumulate those hours. And I
right.
think I also remember you saying that has, we'll get into this a little bit, but I'll start now. But I think that has also driven a little bit of activity internally, right? Like some of the people who have maybe would not come back after a summer week working or maybe work a few more hours. It has driven a little bit of that mindset of, boy, I really want to be part of this. Maybe I should put in a little bit more.
I think, in our industry, especially where there are a couple of swim schools on the call, is that we have struggled with the people work in a swim school until they go out and get their real job. They get their degree and go off and get their real job. And really, we've always talked to our team about this can be a career, this can be a real job. But now with this opportunity for ownership, co-ownership, they do realize that this is something where they can work forever, but they can also build wealth while they're doing it. And I think that that was another one of the reasons why I was looking at employee ownership was, Miami's a great place and you can work very, very, very hard and do very, very, very well and live very well here. But you can also work very, very, very hard and have 8 people living in a 2-bedroom apartment paying $3,000 a month in rent. And there's this huge wealth gap in this community. And so by doing what we did with the Employee Ownership Trust, we're now going to be sharing profits and sharing wealth with the team members who are making the business run and who are making the magic happen. And they have an opportunity now to build wealth and to be able to send kids to college and be able to buy homes and things like that. So that was really important to me.
Chris, I'm going to pause for a second and let you jump in here. What do you? I know it hasn't been, it hasn't been. It's not 6 years ago that you met Miren, but what do you remember about meeting her? What do you remember those initial conversations about an EOT and anything you can share with the audience about how the process went for her? We can get a little bit more in the process, but love for you to jump in here.
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, I don't know how much more I have to add. You could see how much work Miran had already done before she met me. So as a service provider, Miran was kind of the ideal client. She came in, she already had gone through all the options. She knew that this is what she wanted to do, and we were able to kind of get right into it, as far as I can recall.
Mhm,
And you, as you said, Miren, there was flexibility there.
mhm.
Um, Chris, you want to talk a little bit about that flexibility? It's a trust that purchases the business, but it is very flexible. You want to get into just some. I know every one of them's different, but is there anything you could share on the flexibility and maybe some commonality between them all, if there is any?
Sure. Well, one thing I would just say, I got into the employee ownership space 15 years ago, and personally, a big advocate of all forms of employee ownership. Written a PhD dissertation on ESOP, how great ESOPs are. But it seemed like there was a gap in the kind of options that we had here in the U.S. So about 10 years ago, we brought the EOT over to the U.S., and one of the things that was kind of top of mind back then, when I was bringing it over here, is precisely that it's these transactions, employee ownership transactions, are driven by the business owner. And with the ESOP, you have to, as great as it is, you have to jump through a lot of hoops, costs a lot of money, takes a lot of time. And then, of course, there's You have to work with many different service provider firms to kind of get through the ESOP transaction, and that's probably worth it for a lot of
Sorry,
business.
go ahead.
But at the same time, with a worker cooperative, you're operating often under a kind of quite narrow kind of ethical, working with sort of narrow ethical considerations about how the company should be structured moving forward. But with an EOT, it's just very flexible. As long as you're broadly speaking, um, kind of sharing the financial rewards of the company, as long as you're creating a governance structure that's working towards the best interests of the employees, as long as you're building a culture that's there to provide respect and dignity to your employees, you have employee ownership. And within that framework, there's just a lot of flexibility and a lot of ways that business owners can do this in a way that works for them and their family and their goals and their values.
Thanks, Chris. Your discussion prompted a question that says, not familiar with EOTs. Are there any regulatory issues? How about annual valuations, board of directors? I mean, that's a very broad question. I think the governance can get to be a little bit confusing, but let's start with annual valuations. How does a valuation for an EOT happen? How about regulatory? Either one of those.
Sure. Yeah, great question. There isn't a statutory framework or regulatory framework for EOTs. This is a private form of ownership, and um, it's not with the ESOP you're operating under ERISA guidelines. It's just not that way. I mean, think about if you did a management buyout, right? There's not a statutory framework. You could do a management buyout a million different ways, right? Here we are operating with certain ethical considerations in mind. I mean, they're flexible, but there are certain ethical considerations, but it's not a statutory framework, and there aren't regulatory issues to speak of. There is no need for evaluations. Typically, the default sort of simple way to structure an EOT is that you're doing annual profit sharing. So there's no need to do annual valuation for the purpose of profit sharing. Board of director makeup is again very flexible. The goal here is to create a governance system that will work for towards the best interests of the employees. So whether or not you sort of move towards the kind of ESOP approach side of the spectrum, where you have in ESOP language, they call it a circular board structure where the board kind of reappoints itself, not like many nonprofit boards that you might be familiar with. Or you can kind of steer towards the worker cooperative side of the spectrum and have one employee owner, one vote to elect the board of director annually, or you could do something in between. It's very flexible again. You can have internal people, external people on the board. Okay.
There is one other aspect of it is there is a governor of the trust, and I call it governor, but there is an oversight of the trust. I always get the name wrong, but there is someone that looks through to the trust document to make sure that the trust is being followed on an annual basis, right, Chris? Is that the one common theme?
Yeah, well, I mean, I mean, as folks may know, an ESOP is also a trust. I mean,
Yep.
ESOP is also a type of trust, and employee stock ownership trust. The language can get a little bit confusing at times, but just like an ESOP trust has a trustee, an EOT should have it's a trust, it needs a trustee. And you would want to, I think, again, this isn't a matter of sort of statute or regulation, but I think you'd want to have a setup where you have an independent trustee monitoring the company, monitoring the board of directors, making sure that ultimately that the company follows the policies that you, as the business owner who created this, laid out.
Thanks, Chris. And Miren, anything more on the transition before we get to, how did you get, someone already asked the question, but
Yes.
you have a short video, but it's before we get to that announcement, anything else on the transition? How long did it take you? Anything you would do differently? Yeah, just anything about the transition that Chris helped you with that you want to talk about.
So I had done research for about 2 years before finding Chris. And then so once I found Chris, it took about 8 months to do the transaction, so to speak. I think that was pretty quick in all things considered, but I'm not sure, but I really focused a lot on what I wanted out of the transaction. I did think that this was a great way to go because it checked all the boxes of what I wanted. I was able to really write into how I wanted to keep the company. I'm not going anywhere, so there's a lot of flexibility. I'm still the CEO. I'm also the trust protector, so I didn't walk away. I know that there are some really great tax benefits for S Corp ESOPs, which we were an S Corp ESOP, but I really did weigh them against what we were doing with the EOT, and it really did. It worked out with us in terms of we've done some tax strategy work. Regrets, I don't think I have a lot of regrets. I will say there are a lot fewer EOTs. I think I know every single one of them. So if anybody needs to talk to EOT CEOs, I can tell you who they are because I have spoken to all of them. But there are much fewer EOTs, so it's harder to get support from, accountants. My accountant had never heard of this. My attorney had never heard of this. My bank had never heard of this. So that was interesting. I did a lot of educating of different professionals, and I see that as the EOTs increase in number, that is changing, which is really good because now we can direct them to organizations like this. I think there are fewer long-time success stories, but they're coming. This is just because they haven't been around as long, and we want to be one. Like, I want this to be a case study. I want this to work because I want people to realize that this is probably the number one best professional decision of my life. And I've had a lot of decisions over my life, so I'm really excited about it. And I really do think this is I did well. I got a good, healthy exit. So I think this is a win-win for the team members, for the community, because we're keeping money local. I didn't sell to wealthy investors in another state. I sold basically the trust, and my team members are going to benefit from that, and they are going to keep the money local. So I do think there are just really a lot of really great benefits. I see that Stacy has asked a couple of great questions, and one of them was about the bank. Was the conversion bank financed? I could have done bank financing. It took a while to educate my bank about what this was. But finally, when we got there was an opportunity for bank financing. I chose to do seller financing instead. But I do know that there are other EOTs out there that have done bank financing. Just depends on what your goals are. So I chose to do seller financing.
Yeah. And then we get past the transition, and what was the day? I'm sure you remember the day, exact day. What was the day that you decided to do the announcement? Did anybody have any idea that it was coming before I play the video?
Well, it's funny. March 1st was our transaction date. Maybe that's a small regret. I really wanted to do it December 31st to have cleaner books like 1 year, and the year didn't work out that way because of my bank, but because of mortgages and other things we had to do. But I did transact on March 1st or February 29th, I guess. And March 1st was the first day of the new EOT, and I announced on March 3rd. I had brought the team together for a longtime team member event. One of the team members is actually here, and it's one of our part-time owners, I might add, is on this call. I just realized that. And I brought the team together to do a longtime team member event. We had just celebrated our 30-year anniversary. We were all coming together, and I did this whole I did this whole history of Ocaquatics, where we had been, what we had done. And I also mentioned to them that PE and private equity was very interested in the business we had built. And I had talked about all of that. And then I think you have the video. Is that what you wanted to show?
Yeah, let's see if I can get this to work.
Let's see.
I'm gonna take this backwards. There we go.
So I have sold the company to an employee ownership trust. And what this means is that on March 1st, at midnight, while you were all sleeping, you all became co-owners of Ocaquatics.
So you can see their faces. They really don't understand what's going on.
I love this. I love the guy in the blue. He's like,
yes. Well, now
what?
he's especially happy. But we did because before that I had built it up and built it up that private equity really wanted to buy the company, and I had sold the company, and they were all thinking I had sold to private equity. But that's when I mentioned it, but they didn't get it. So there was a ton of confusion in the room. And then it slowly evolved to shock, like, really? This is really happening? And then it kept going. So I think, there's another video. I don't know if you're going to show that, but
Yeah, sure.
we did a few minutes first before with this next part. We did a few minutes of explaining what it meant and how this was going to affect them. Oh, you have them. There you have them here. So what their rights to profit sharing were, what their rights to information were going to be. The next slide might be, were there any other benefits to employee ownership? We talked about those things. We also talked about, and then they were coming around. So. But you can still see
the lady in the black and white said, "Me? I'm an owner." Like,
that's
really,
what you see. And they're still a little confused. So that was the thing. And then it just kept getting better and better. Eventually we kept talking about it. We kept educating them about it. We showed some financials. We showed some different things. And then eventually it was more accepted and really exciting. And it really turned into joy. So it kind of went from total confusion to shock to joy during the night. And that was really great. And we have now had, I think what was really important for us was before this announcement, we had practiced open book financials for 2 years with our management team, which was about 25 people. So that was very helpful because then we could start to now, trickle that down to the other owners. And so we have decided, and I know that you have some other things there that you might want to show, but we have done, March 3rd, we made the announcement. March 4th, we had a meeting with our team members. We had a lunch and learn where we talked about financials and what that meant for them. And we had a lot of people there. And then we also, we've done all sorts of things. We did, do you have anything that you wanted to show?
Yeah, I think this was the one I was going to ask you about, which is this great little cartoon
Yes.
your crack marketing team,
Yes.
all about EOTs, right?
So we actually brought in an artist. She's one of our swimming parents. We brought in an artist the night of the announcement, and she just drew. She just drew what it meant. She actually did several drawings, and it was one of those things that everybody could go home with. And it just showed, it was kind of a summary of everything when they became an owner, what actually had happened during this transaction, that it was a trust and that they had benefits, and we wanted, why I chose to do these things. So all those things, she just kind of captured that in drawing, and they got to take that home.
I think one of the things, again, we're not going to get into the deep details on
Sure.
how your EOT works because they are, as Chris said, they're all very flexible. I think for me, one of the most important things that people know about the EOT is that for most of the time, EOTs all focus around the sharing of profits in some way. Can you talk a little bit about how that happens within your EOT? I know your first profit sharing is coming up, but you have a different way or a special way of doing profits. They're based on your earnings during the period. Some of it goes to the 401k. Can you talk a little bit about the main part of your EOT and how that operates here on the right-hand side in green?
So we are doing profit sharing at the end of the year. And so it is based on compensation and their earnings. And we are actually half of that, the profit that they will be receiving will come to them in a check. And then the other half will be going into their 401k until they hit retirement age. If we have anybody who's over retirement age, they would get the entire amount. But because we really do encourage retirement planning and retirement savings. We've had a 401k for 15 years, and we do a lot of 401k education. We really want them to continue to pour into their 401k. We do have a match separately from this with our 401k, but this will just be a way for them to get more money into their retirement accounts.
And the match, I think the important part is the match didn't go away. It's so many times
Match
people
didn't go
ask
away. Right.
when
We
I'm
kept
talking
it
about,
there.
well, should I continue to do my whether it's an ESOP, an EOT, or anything,
Yes.
change is never good. And if you change and take something away, it's even it's even worse. So it was
We
great to
kept it,
see that you
we kept it the same. Yes, we did. So,
and it says your
um,
healthcare continues,
mhm,
financial classes continue, language. I mean, everything continues on.
yes,
It's simply that we're sharing the profits with co-owners going forward.
right, right. That's it. And so this is the picture we took that night of, and everybody was pretty happy at this point. And so this is a really great team. We did a lot of education for the team, in the coming, and from then on, from March 1st on or March 3rd on, we've done a lot of education. We did financial education. It's funny, I met Carrie Siggins, and she wrote The Ownership Mindset. It's a book she's the CEO of an ESOP. I met her when I was thinking we were going to turn into an ESOP. And she just happened to be in Miami the week that we did the transaction. So she came by and she talked to everyone about, what it meant to be an employee owner. Then we read this book over the summer, and we read it, every couple of weeks. We did a little check-in and talked about the book. And she popped onto our last online session, and it was really, really fun. I would encourage, this is a great book, to talk about the ownership mindset and what that means, whether or not you're an employee-owned company and whatever structure you choose. I think it really is a really great book, just about ownership thinking in general. We also did some webinars, I think, with Chris Michael. He came on and he did a couple of webinars for our team, and we did have those translated into Spanish as well for our team. We had everyone sign a co-owner pledge, which just talks about, their commitment to the company. We're committing to them, and they're committing, to behaviors around ownership and what that meant. We also designed a website for our team members, and that way they can go on there and see the details of the trust anytime they'd like to. And then we also have a newsletter that we put out every semester that shows the overview. It's a financial review each semester with how we're doing, our profit share, things like that. We have done business cards, co-owner business cards, and they're virtual. So that way, if they are at Home Depot, I'm looking at some Samuels. He was the gentleman in blue in the video. But if he's at Home Depot and there's a family of 4 behind him, he can turn around and say, "Oh, do you guys take swimming lessons?" And if they say no, he can give out his business card, a virtual little QR code, and they can sign up for a free swimming lesson. So they have that power to do that. We created dashboards that really we have a lot of goals, and we created dashboards about, how to hit our goals, and they're everywhere. And we do play a lot of games. So we win prizes. It's very much centered around the great game of business. And we have a fund where they can get a pool of money in their fund, and they can spend it on their location and do different things. And it drives, like for every, oh, I'll let
I'm
you.
sorry. Go ahead.
Hey,
I'll go back one. There we go. Sorry.
Okay. Well, we incentivize, like if they get a 5-star review at their location, they get $10 in their pool of money. And so, we have 3,500 5-star reviews and it's pretty amazing on Google. So it has really driven ownership behavior, but it's also driven, they're just really proud of the work they're doing. And it really has helped, and it's been a really, really great 10 months, I guess, since we transitioned to employee ownership. So, yes.
I am amazed. I mean, when I've been doing was in the ESOP community for almost 25 years, and I don't think you realize how much you created in less than a year. And you look at some other employee-owned companies who haven't created that much in their first 5 years. So I know some of that came from your employee co-owners, your co-owners jumping in as well, but you should be applauded. I know somebody said that in the chat, that you've got some amazing things happening. And I think, for me, it's somebody asked, what behavioral changes have you seen? I'll let you answer that, but I think the next and last slide that I'll share is that first video. To me, you couldn't get better than that behavioral change right there, but I'll let you share anything else before I show that video that popped up out of nowhere.
So I think, what behavioral changes? We've always had a really great culture, especially because we're working on, I mean, we save lives. We teach swimming and that saves lives. And we also work on social and environmental responsibility. So we have this really great culture. But this whole ownership shift, I mean, it's always been part of one of our guiding principles, but ownership thinking has really helped. They own their decisions, they own their choices. If somebody messes up, we just say, own it, fix it, and move on, So we really we talk about the word ownership quite a bit. So, but I think this has really, and we thought they were doing a great job before. I think this has even leveled it up because they are owners and they do think like owners. And I really do love how, we have so many examples of, one of our mothers on our team who has 2 young children, and every time she goes to her children's school, she has a big yellow Ocaquatics bag because she says, I want people to see, I want to always be marketing for Ocaquatics and little things like that, So I think that's been great. What has been really great is, just seeing their opportunity and how they are excited to see what's coming. They're excited to see financials, and they're learning about their personal financials as well as professional financials. So they're understanding more and more about, if you walk into one of my management meetings or one of our financial meetings, they're discussing P&Ls like students in college who have studied finances. And some of these people haven't gone to college. So it's been pretty amazing to hear them talking about profit margins and top line revenue and how we can drive enrollments and, how do we maximize, different things. So I think that that's pretty amazing. I'm really proud of that. So why don't you show the video and then I can talk some more if I think
Sure.
the one that you're going to show.
Yeah, so this is a video that you said was not your idea, and they came to you with this, correct?
I didn't create it. They did it all.
Hey, did you guys know that Ocaquatics is employee owned?
Ocaquatics turned 30 years old. We transitioned over to 100% employee ownership.
This means that all team members become co-owners after a certain amount of hours worked.
As co-owners, we spread all the profit at the end of the year.
As co-owners, we get increased transparency and a voice.
In addition to keeping ownership local, we represent the diverse Miami community.
Out of 50 current co-owners, 34 were born in another country.
Over 90% identify as Black or Hispanic.
70% are women.
The ages of our co-owners range from 19 to
81.
We are proud to be employee owned.
So I love that because it really does show who our team is, and they're really proud to be co-owners. And, we celebrate when a future co-owner, we call our team members, they're either co-owners or future co-owners. So if we hire a 16-year-old young man in high school today, we call him a future co-owner. And we're trying to build in that ownership mindset and that ownership thinking. And when they finally hit their 2,500 hours, we celebrate that. We give them a t-shirt and we give them their hat that says co-owner, and we have them sign the banner on the wall, and we have them, we have a little ritual that we go through, and it's really great. So, that's been really fun. It's been great for our team. It's also been great for marketing. I mean, we've had a lot of publicity about this. We've had the local papers, we've had news stations, we've had the colleges want to talk to us. So that's been really great. We've also gotten some good national media attention. And this has been really fun for me, especially because I want to keep getting the word out that EOTs are a really great alternative to succession planning and employee ownership. It's a great succession plan, but it's also a great, business model. And I think that this is going to prove that because I haven't gone anywhere. I'm still here, and the business is running great, and they're making the magic happen. So.
Speaking of the future and co-owners, there's been a few questions about the future, your future. You said you're not going anywhere. You are one of the questions about being, how are you being paid out? I think we don't have to get into details, but what's your future? You are receiving a portion of the profits as a payment for your business as you go.
Yes.
you're also on a plan possibly to transfer. And what's that management succession look like? How have you prepared them? Do you have an executive team that you're talking to about what's the future look like for you and Aquatics?
Yeah, so I was 52 when I, did this transaction. So I don't have any plans of going anywhere. I'm not going to retire anytime soon, not yet. The business is buying the transaction. They're buying the business from me, or I sold it to a trust, and the trust is paying me back out of the cash flow of the company each month. So there's a note payment, and some people do very short payment. If they do seller financing, it might be 5 to 7 years. I extended mine out to 12 years so that I really want there to be a profit to share in year one. I want our team members to see that and to see that they will be making, hopefully, I didn't want to have my team members have to wait 5 or 7 years before earning a profit. So this way they'll be getting some profit, hopefully in year one. I did tell everybody at the announcement that, the first payment might only be about $17, so they shouldn't go out and buy a car or plan on, upgrading their home yet. But I know it's going to be much more than $17, and I'm really excited about that for this first year.
And what's your executive team look like right now? What's changed about if anything, has anything changed on the executive team as you look to the future? You're not going anywhere anytime soon, but do those questions come up? Has anything changed?
So it's funny. I love how Chris mentioned this. Or he explained this to me. Like when you do this, everything changes and nothing changes in my situation. Everything changed with ownership. I am no longer, on February 29th, I was 100% owner of Ocaquatics Swim School. And on March 1st, I was a co-owner, with 50 other people. So in that regard, that is all very different. But in terms of management and the governance structure, how we're operating the business, nothing has changed. I'm still the CEO. We have operations, we have finance, we have our executive team is still in place. They are still running the business. We do have more, I want to say more transparency, but we've always been very, very transparent with our team members and talked about that. And so, and I'm going to point out, Denise is on the call. She's part-time team member. Hi, Miss Denise. And she's a part-time team member who's been with us for many years. And, she actually was one of the people she is a co-owner. And so I think that that's really amazing. I love the fact that we can do this with people who work full-time and they're on the executive team, or we can do this with people who are part-time, who have been devoted and have worked with us for many years. So I love that. Really excited about that.
Denise, you can tell me to just go away, but I'm going to put you on the spot. If you want to turn on your audio, you certainly can. If you want to say no, but I'd love to know just anything you want to share with the audience about what it means to be a co-owner.
And I didn't know Denise was going to be here today.
I didn't either. So if she's trying to get her audio to go, maybe it won't go. Yeah. All right. Well, we put her on the spot. So she's on her phone. I know that's difficult, but. Well, I've asked for people to put questions in the chat as we go. We're about running out of time here. I'd love to have any other questions. In fact, if you want to ask in the chat, if you did want to turn your audio on, you could just raise your hand and I could call on you. While we wait for that, is there anything that I missed, Miren, that you'd love to share with the audience?
I think one of the things you were also asking about, regrets if I would have done anything differently. I spent a lot of money on researching. I spent a lot of money. I spent between $40,000 and $50,000 on researching, taking my little semester-long class on profit sharing, getting an ESOP attorney evaluation, feasibility study, all these things. But I don't see them as a regret. I really needed to do the research. The same I chose Chris because, and Chris doesn't know I'm going to do this either, but he's a college professor, so he's really good at explaining things to people who don't understand. And I must have asked the same question 100 times. I really needed to understand what we were doing. And Chris was really patient and really kind and helped me through that whole process. And that was the thing. I needed to do that research. I spoke to every single CEO of an ESOP that I could find, and then every single CEO of an EOT. So I would encourage people to just talk and talk and talk to figure out if this is the right fit for your organization. So,
And that is where, if you haven't heard our spiel yet, I mean, that is really where the State Center Network, why the State Center Network was created. 24 different state centers and then a national organization to come to be connected with those resources. We know who's in your state, we know who is in your industry, and so we really want to be there to help people as they go. Denise, I saw that you were able to unmute yourself. Would you like to share anything about your journey?
Wow. I'm still in a almost 7-year dream. So when I wake up, I'll let you know. It's a wonderful dream. I never dreamed that I would be working for such a company. You know, it's like when you go from corporate to private, I never knew it would be this fantastic to work for an organization that care about people, care about their employees' families, and care about the community. That's the whole nutshell of an organization that is just amazing to work for. And I'm glad I'm there.
well,
Thank
you're an
you.
important part, Denise. You're an important part of that organization. So I'm glad you're here today too. So
Thank you, Miss Miren. Wow.
Somebody asked about tax issues and somebody else asked about 401k. Miren, you already answered that they are automatically, you do auto enroll for the 401k, so that's
we
not
do.
an issue.
We do. They opt out if they, and they know that if they're a co-owner, they'll get, and we really do a lot of 401k education. We have financial advisors that come in several times a year to help people through that, to really explain to them that if they save $5 a week, you know, what a difference it would make in a few years because they are so young. And we do a lot of personal financial education. But if they're a co-owner, they're automatically enrolled. They have to be enrolled if they want to get that share of the profit. So, and then Chris can probably talk to the tax issues. If
You want to get into tax issues, Chris? I guess for me,
in 2 minutes.
the summary on tax issues would just be that there are no tax benefits for creating an EOT. And in my general comment would be taxability of everything is because of that. It's almost always ordinary income or some sort of capital gains on, you know, there isn't any special tax, like you said, Chris, no regulatory oversight here, so there are no tax benefits as well.
Yeah, it's a very tax efficient transaction and it's taxed like any other sale.
But it is a mergers and acquisitions transaction, like it is something, you know, so that's I have learned a lot about all the different transactions and everything. So we've learned a lot about tax strategy as well.
Well, without any more questions and coming up on time, this is a perfect time to say thank you again for everybody for attending. Most importantly, Miren, I can't thank you enough for taking an hour and beyond the hour. You've been a huge advocate for employee ownership. You've been a huge advocate for EOTs, and we just appreciate you helping us move this along and let other people know about the wonderful aspects of employee ownership. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Steve.
Yes, it was wonderful, Miren. I appreciated all your insight.
Thank you. Feel free to reach out. I'm happy to talk, always happy to talk more.
And we will send a
I may
follow-up
do
email.
that.
We will send a follow-up email. There won't be, I'll add Miren, we'll see how many of these slides you want to share publicly. It was mainly there for people to see, you know, kind of what you're up to, but let's talk about that as we close. And then thank you again for everybody, but we will send the recording for sure around to everybody. If you missed part of it or you want to see more of it, the recording will come. So thank you, everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you. Bye.